Palestinian building. During the tribute, Ms. Corrie's parents and colleagues read selections from the journal of the 23-year-old peace activist. The event from the Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School in Berkeley, California, was hosted by KPFA Radio and is about 2 hours.
Rachel's father, Craig, begins tonight by reading from a paragraph he wrote in the book's introduction. Then the readers will follow one another without introductions and please with no applause until all our readers have conveyed Rachel's words. The readers are all here voluntarily, prompted by their feelings for Rachel Corrie. In order, tonight's readers are Aren't they beautiful? Camille Baptista, who is an 8th grader here at King Middle School. And thank you. I am going to ask you to hold your applause till the end, but thanks for your acknowledgement. Sanjina Patnaik, Rachel Corrie's cousin and a grad student at UC Berkeley. Liat Weingart, Israeli-American and 3rd-generation Holocaust survivor. Lisa Nessen, former activist with the International Solidarity Movement in Palestine. Nadia Barhoum, about to graduate from UC Berkeley and active in Students for Justice in Palestine. Sandra Lupian, former news anchor and public affairs producer with KPFA, now active with the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition. Patricia Hemphill, active with both the Freedom Archives and Critical Resistance. Nadia Hamache, Lebanese-American, active with the Arab Cultural and Community Center and with La Peña Cultural Center. Sorry, that was Nadine. Sorry, Nadine. Nora Barrows-Friedman, senior producer and co-host of Flashpoints on KPFA Radio, also active with IBDA Cultural Center in Dheisheh Refugee Camp on the West Bank. And Kian Daoud, 3rd-generation Palestinian refugee from Dheisheh Refugee Camp and a student at San Francisco State University majoring in international relations. Now you can give them all a big hand. It's quite an amazing group of women activists. Rachel's mom and dad, if you don't know already, tonight will assure you, are extraordinarily wonderful individuals. Personally, I'm not a parent, but I know that there are no words to describe the pain of losing a child. It would be understandable if Cindy and Craig Corrie had retreated from life to mourn and to heal. Instead, they chose the dynamic therapy of continued activism, speaking out for justice all over this country, from the corporate boardrooms of Caterpillar to all over Israel and to Palestine, in Rachel's name. They created this book, this tribute to Rachel, as one more step towards peace with justice. Please welcome Craig Corrie.
Thank you. Rachel wrote, "Writing is brave. It is maybe the only brave thing about me." Rachel was brave enough to write from the soul, powerfully and personally articulating the human condition. She understood that moral beliefs require more from us than dinner table banter. In offering Rachel's writing to the public, our family helps her complete her journey to become a published writer. But we also put her very human soul on display. In so doing, we share her trepidation and we envy her courage. In offering Rachel's writing, our family hopes that you will find reflected in it a bit of your own insight, ethic, and humor, a bit of your own soul. The world knows Rachel by how she died, but we, her family, know Rachel from how she lived. She was, first and last, a writer and an artist. Compelled to create, she was left only with the decision to become good at it. Rachel worked hard at her craft from an early age. I remember taking her to work with me one day when she was 10, and a coworker asked her, "Rachel, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And she stared him straight in the eye and she said, "I am a poet." Words were sacred to Rachel, and her words have become treasures to us. They are what we have left, and they are an immense gift to our family. With the book, we offer that gift to the rest of you. Thank you.
My name is Rachel Corrie. I was born on April 10th, 1979, in Olympia, Washington, to my mother and father, Craig and Cindy Corrie, a brother, Chris, who was about 7, a sister, Sarah, who was 2 years younger, and a really old cat named Phoebe. I went to preschool. It was a little house down the hill from a swing set and up the hill from the beach, with multicolored bells on the windowsill, eagles, a green carpet in the library, and what seemed like millions of windows with leafy light falling through them. I grew. I learned to spell cat, to read little books. I continued to draw and started to watercolor. When I was 5, I discovered boys, which made my life a little more difficult, just a little, and a lot more interesting. In 1st grade, I started my 5 years in the options program. Options was a place to truly learn how to feel, how to be, and how to be the kind of person I want to be. I remember waiting for the carpool. I would wait for whoever's driving that day on the bridge down the hill from my house with my mom. She would read to me from different books, or just stand and talk to me while I gazed through the concrete posts of the bridge at the mouth of the creek. My dad also read to me. We read things like the Mowgli stories, the Chronicles of Narnia, and around Christmas time, I would crawl into his lap and listen to him reading stories from a big red Christmas book. I graduated from options last summer, and there followed an episode of, "This huge part of my life just fell away. What do I do now?" And "I have to leave all my friends and go to a new school with new people with new values," followed by a low but pitiful moan. So now I'm in middle school. My brother will come home from his 1st year of college in a month. I'll get my driver's license in, 4 years? I want to be a lawyer, a dancer, an actress, a mother, a wife, a children's author, a distance runner, a poet, a pianist, a pet store owner, an astronaut, an environmental and humanitarian activist, a psychiatrist, a ballet dancer, and the first woman president. A pinpoint of light shining from the darkness. Only I notice it. What mystery does it hold? Who loves that light? What is this one sun, the one I see? What secret is it keeping? I slept so lightly in the silence of an iced morning that I was awakened by the frost. Maybe if people stopped thinking of themselves and started thinking of the other sides of things, people wouldn't hurt each other. I wouldn't worry about people hurting each other because each person would work till they discovered the right thing to do. People wouldn't cheat or lie. But would they just get so depressed knowing so many feelings and troubles, caring about every little thing? I guess people are happier not caring. Well, if people are happy ignoring everyone else, I can't stop them. I know I'm not like that. I feel terrible when I lie in bed and hear people fighting or when someone cries. I hate seeing war on TV. Gee, maybe I should try not caring sometime. Then I'd be unstoppable, untouchable. What a blast, or would it be? Dear soldier, I guess I don't really understand the world because I don't see why you aren't here. Why people can't make compromises. Why peace is still a vision and war is our near reality. I must be ignorant because I believe that's unnecessary for 40,000 children to die every day. I know I'm just a little 6th grader who writes poetry and worries about grades and makeup, but I worry about bigger things. I worry about the whales dying, about the ozone layer depleting, about the trees being cut down. I guess everyone worries about those things somewhat. The ice has been creeping into the puddles with cold, jutting hands. As I walk on the grass in my yard each morning, it crunches from the stiffness of the frost. The sky is a canvas, stretched gray from one edge of the horizon to the hills. It is spattered with circling white seagulls glaring down with yellow eyes onto the earth. There is such beauty in the way the gulls turn their wings and soar in turning tranquility. There are 1,000 things that echo through my mind when I think of this planet. Peace and cooperation are at the front of my mind.
When my grandma was dying, my mom spent most of the years of her illness at her bedside. In the beginning, you couldn't tell that there was anything eating my grandma. I could act the same way I always did and pretend that there was no illness. But then she started losing weight and growing paler and quieter and more sad. She kept up the same game I did, pretending that there was no leukemia. About a week before she died, my sister and I came to Minnesota to see her at the hospital. My cousins were there, and 2 of my aunts. My uncle and 2 other aunts came up on the weekends. All of them knew how to act around my grandma. I did not know how to be sad for her, or support her, or love her when she was sick. The sight of her in that sterile hospital bed made me sick. The thought of an entity in her body ravaging her eluded my grasp. The only person who seemed as helpless as me was my grandpa. He was never around until she died. My mom came back to our hotel in the night. I was completely helpless. I don't remember if I cried, but I do remember waking up in the early morning. I heard my grandpa in the room and my mom and uncle. I kept my eyes closed for a long time, just lying there, because I didn't know what to do when I woke up. That is probably as out of place and different as I have ever felt in my life. I want to be an artist or a dancer. I would like to change the world. I don't want to do drugs. I may drink underage, but I don't plan to. I believe in finding who you are, but drugs sometimes become a definition of people. There are people behind those definitions. I won't drink to enhance myself or make myself more enjoyable to others, because drinking doesn't enhance you. At this point, I'm still finding myself and developing myself. And now would not be a good time to take drugs, because I don't want to find a drug where a part of my mind or my heart is supposed to be. Bagel for Bridget. This is what it's all about from here on out, girl. It's all about everything going around in a circle, and sometimes you wonder what's at the middle of that circle and you get scared that it's just a hole. But maybe that hole is a window to frame the things you see. And that's what it's all about, really. Looking out a window at all the things you can imagine and being a little terrified, but still looking and planning and staking out a path. And it's also about carbohydrates, food. It's about what you gobble up at lunchtime driving back from Bagel Brothers. It's feeding your belly and your body and your mind and your soul so that you grow, so that you always grow, so that no aspect of you ever starves. And it's about the simple pleasures that keep getting you out of bed every morning, toasted with butter or jam or cream cheese and cucumbers. Simple little things that you know will be there when you wake up. Blankets, sunlight on Puget Sound, dew on the cedars, daisies, somewhere mountains, somewhere the ocean. The consistent things, the old things, like evergreen trees at dusk. And it's something to feed the ducks with, and the squirrels, and to share with me in Spanish class. Something of yourself to spread around, something to share with your friends. You, girl, are the most beautiful thing I've seen all year. You have shared so much with me. Always divided ice cream evenly, always played fair. You have so many wildflowers to give to the people around you, so much bagel to share. And it's about something that comes from grain, from small, tiny little seeds, from flour. It's about things that are as long-standing and comfortable as wheat fields and grain. It's about making the most out of all of your ingredients, because you've got some premium ingredients in that soul of yours. It's about coming over to my house and eating one sometime soon, and always knowing that you're at the center of my heart. You're the guacamole in my veggie bagel sandwich. You're better than veggie cream cheese. In April, I walked along the edge of the Pacific Ocean and dipped my fingers into the water. For the first time in my life, I was looking east over the Pacific. My feet were no longer on the firm, familiar continent of North America. I was in Russia. I have never witnessed anything as devastatingly beautiful as the long arc the water made that day as it rippled away toward America. My memories of Russia are a collection of vivid images: drinking tea in the tiny green kitchen of our flat, walking through mud and garbage between the buildings, a lanky cat looking down from a gray balcony, coal dust on the snow, curious, unfamiliar faces turning to watch me walk by. Before and after that brief flurry of vision and emotion, the rest of my life seems like a long, barren plateau. I have never been so awake, painfully, poignantly awake, as I was in Russia. On that long, gray beach, I dreaded the imminent return to my country. America did not call to me. It did not reach out to me and entice me back. It lurked upon the edges of my mind in dashes of fluorescent color. When I dipped my fingers into the water, blinking at the horizon, no echoing chorus of my country drifted across the ocean. The unbroken melody of the dreams of my people was buried beneath the low, twisted murmur, the whine of cellular phones and infomercials, the chatter of tabloid talk shows and court TV. This commercialized, empty soul was the thing I escaped in Russia, and I dreaded returning into the long halls of my home, filled with cool, plastic images of perfection. When I did come back, it was as if I had been wide awake for a month and a half, awake in a world to blink and gaze at everything, and then shoved back into a numb stupor. The only thing my country told me when I returned was, close your eyes, go back to sleep again. I could not close my eyes to the incongruities of our nation. There's a tacky irony in all of our comparative wealth. I gazed with wide, unblinking eyes at a country with much to offer and yet so tangled in commercialism and media. Our country has forgotten its soul and has contrived a harsh, gaudy personality. We have lost sight of our old dreams and ideas, not the conventions which bound women to the home and cursed African Americans to subservience, but the awareness, thoughtful awareness, which produced Thoreau, Whitman, and Kerouac. There is a throbbing, hushed call beneath the tackiness and the gaudiness. That call was welling up a long time ago when Native Americans carved homes into the walls of canyons and cut the images of animals out of their totem poles. That call lingered and reverberated as our forefathers penned the Constitution. That call fluttered into an odd, complicated melody as Thoreau contemplated life from the edge of Walden Pond and Whitman shocked his readers with Leaves of Grass. That call shook and trembled during the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, but it prevailed. That called some out into the streets to protest, others into airplanes and battlefields. That call led a few out into lonely wilderness, pen or paintbrush in hand, to try to find a way of recording it. That call led me away. It led me to Russia, where the din of political diatribes and OJ lawyers was quiet. Quiet enough for me to hear, gentle and faltering, America's call.
I didn't have to explain myself for my first 4 trimesters of high school. I got straight A's, enthusiastically attended pep rallies, ate lunch with the same group of all-American, high-achieving girls each day, and did my homework every night before going to bed. I went to every football game. I volunteered at the Olympia Crisis Clinic so that I could non-judgmentally help kids who weren't quite as all-American and high-achieving as I was. I got my first B second trimester of my sophomore year. Sometimes I did my homework the period before it was due. And sometimes I even ventured down the hall to eat with the kids who wore flannel and ripped jeans and pierced more than just their ears. Then I went to Russia. Ah, Russia. Former menacing communist empire full of gorgeous people, coal dust on the snow, bland rectangular buildings that looked beautiful in the sunset, sweet, smiling girls who shrugged their shoulders and tossed empty vodka bottles off balconies, people who supposedly waited in bread lines, squeezing my wrists and heaping extra servings of caviar and mashed potatoes on my plate. Ah, Russia, that Russia, my Russia. Suddenly there were contradictions. Imagine little Rachel standing in her coat and gloves in the doorway to a tiny apartment building and suddenly realizing, good God, the world isn't black and white. The sky was gray, and there was garbage in the street, and the snow was black, and paint was peeling off all the buildings, but it took my breath away, knocked the wind right out of me. I cried on the plane all the way home from the Canadian border when the sun started rising. Everything was dark and pink and purple, and the mountains grew up out of the water, pink and purple, and the clouds stretched out, pink and purple. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, but it just could not compete with those stark rectangular buildings lined up beneath that gray sky. Contradictions. I cried all the way home over contradictions. Third trimester of my sophomore year, my grades took a nosedive. We all said it was because it was too hard to catch up after going to Russia. We all said it was worth it. But then, for some reason, I didn't go to football games my junior year, and I didn't spend so much time with my all-American friends, and my grades did not come up again. That's where things become hard to explain. I started writing the other day at McDonald's, but the idea of being this weird beatnik chick composing prose between French fries didn't appeal to me, so I stopped. I've decided that I'm going to spend the rest of my life traveling the US as a prospective student at small liberal arts colleges. Either that, or like Courtney Love, I'm going to write some silly songs about how much it sucks to go to high school in Olympia, dye my hair the color of a skinned chicken, show my crotch a lot, and hopefully make big money. I've decided that I only like new people. New people are better than old people. New people can't reject you. And if they do, it's their fault for not giving you a chance. New people are curious about who you are, and they don't stop being curious until you turn into old people. You can be honest with new people because you have nothing invested. That's why I'm never going to get married or have children or stay in one place for more than 5 years. I'm scared that I won't get into Reed because of my grades, and I'll end up at the UW with a bunch of ex-boyfriends from high school. I'm scared I'll get my first ever bout of writer's block when I have to write my application essay. I remember when my sister was struggling with those essays, and I thought she was nuts because even as a 7th grader, I knew that writing was the most absolutely natural thing in the world. Now I know how she felt. I'm listening to Lisa Says by the Velvet Underground. If I could time travel, I'd either go back to the 20s and hang out in Paris with Gertrude Stein and F. Scott Fitzgerald and Hemingway and Picasso and E.E. Cummings, or I'd go back to the late 60s and early 70s and hang out with Jim Carroll and Andy Warhol and the Velvet Underground and the whole factory. I like this song. It's good to write to. Okay, I'm Rachel. I'm your average, run-of-the-mill teenager. Sometimes I wear ripped blue jeans. Sometimes I wear polyester. Sometimes I take off all my clothes and swim naked at the beach at the Evergreen State College. Tomorrow, I'm taking the last test I ever have to take in high school, so I can graduate next week and go to college in April. I'm just a little person. I don't believe in fate, but my astrological sign is Aries, the ram, and my sign on the Chinese zodiac is the sheep. And the name Rachel means sheep. And hey, I often feel sheepish. I've got a fire in my belly. It's always been there. It used to be such a big, loud, blazing fire that I couldn't hear anybody else over it. So I talked a lot, and I didn't listen much. And then I went to middle school, where you gotta be cool, and you gotta be strong and tough. So I ate all my fire like this. And I tried real hard to be cool. But right around this time, 2 years ago, I started to get indigestion. And luckily, I happened to get a free trip to Russia, and I saw another country for the first time. I looked backwards across the Pacific Ocean, and from that distance, some things back here in Olympia, Washington, USA, seemed a little weird and disconcerting. But I was awake in Russia, in the coal dust, in the snow. I was awake for the first time in forever, with bug eyes and a grin and tears of joy. And there was a fire in my belly and outside of me, and it flowed all around. And then I came back, and I was awake, finally awake, forever and ever, with warm fire in my belly to keep me warm. But sometime, when I wasn't looking, all the lights went out, and it was dark. And the only fires during those 4 or 5 months were the cigarettes. And then, blinking slowly in the dark, I was awake. I saw how things were in the dark, finally awake, forever and ever. And after that, I crawled along on my hands and knees for a while. I fell in love for the first time. And then crazy, neurotic fire eventually burned that first love out. And I threw all my fire into falling instantly, madly in love with some other people. But of course that didn't work. And I just kept crawling along, just a little person. And sometimes the lights went out, dark. And then I'd crawl along in the dark until I ran into something. I ran into people. I started trying when the dark came to find people in the dark. And the more I learned to find other little people to talk to in my little voice, the less dark it gets. And right now, my fire is just a warm place in my belly, helping me melt cold things and write stories and paint. And now I think I'm just barely starting to wake up, yawning and stretching and just beginning to open my eyes. And I think maybe that's what I'm going to be working on, finally, forever and ever. So there's a very small glance at my very small understanding of the nature of things. Lately, I've been thinking about writing a book called Rachel's Myopic View of the World. I've been painting pictures. I've been painting little pictures for my friends. Sometimes when I think things are going to get dark, I make my hand into a little fist, and I close my eyes, and I see a little tiny bright white flame in my head, and that's my fire. That's what makes me strong. That's what makes me write and paint. That's what makes me humble. That's what makes me strong. It's my little person. That's my language for it. That's how I describe it. And all of you have different words for it in different languages, but this is my language, and these are my metaphors. See, I'm in love with a butterfly, and I chase it everywhere all by myself. out onto rocks and cliffs and into hot springs. Sometimes I get carried away and try to catch my butterfly and pin it down with a huge hat pin. And that's when I say, I'm awake, finally, forever and ever. But that's just because I'm a little person who's scared of pain. Sometimes I try to make other people fall in love with my butterfly and chase it with me, but I can't because it's my butterfly. Sometimes it seems lonely and dark chasing my butterfly with my hat pin. But when I make my hand into a fist and think about it, I can't be lonely because there are 7 billion different butterflies. Today I talked to a friend who's heard that butterfly metaphor. I've been telling him for a while to stop trying to club my butterfly. So I called him this morning to apologize for dropping anvils on his butterfly, thinking it was self-defense. And he said that he'd like it a lot better if he thought his dragonfly was playing with my butterfly. And I said, the bottom line is, we're all friends. And he said, the bottom line is, we all are. So you learn something new every day. I've been working at the crisis clinic for years. I've talked to lots of teenagers and lots of adults. And every single person, even the craziest of crazies, has their own language and their own butterfly.
Dear Mom, I'm sitting in LA at dawn looking out at a stagnant swimming pool and a rainbow of flowers. I had a dream about you last night. You haunt me because I see such a light coming out of you, but your light is different color than my light. And I want to whisper, don't be scared. And I want to pretend that I can become your idea of me, but I can't. I know I scare you, but being on a tightrope with a safety net and a costume doesn't work for me. I want to paint my face with the color of your eyes, but I don't want to wear your costume. When I look at you, I can see music. I can see a song playing on your face, in your voice, when you talk to me, when you talk to my friends. And I'm grateful. I fall down and sob over that song. I cry with gratitude because you can make that song for so many people. I have to do things that scare you. I'm sorry I scare you. I hope I'm not ugly in your eyes, but I want to write and I want to see. And what would I write about if I only stayed within the doll's house, the flower world I grew up in? What kind of writer would I be? What kind of seer would I be if I stayed in the prism I grew up in? I would hear the bird voices like kazoos and xylophones. I would see the rainbows and sparkles in everyone's eyes. But I wouldn't be able to accept ugliness that was different than my ugliness. I wouldn't be able to see pain that was beyond my pain, our pain. I would be beautiful. I would be strong like you, and I would have a smile like yours. And that strength and that smile are mountains and cornfields and daisies and milkweed. And I shudder and I sob at the beauty of all that. You brought the soil with you from Iowa. You brought the bare, fecund soil and you passed it on to me. You gave me a love that was so unconditional, that is so bare and poignant and forgiving and brown and soft like the soil, that I have to plant things in it. I have to plant cacti and palm trees and sticker brushes and daisies and pumpkins. I have to let the wild ginger and ferns take root and grow there. You gave me a potential. I grew up with faith, and letting in everything that I can let in without breaking myself is the only justice I can do to all that soil. You gave me a flower bed and a cornfield and a lake and a whitish-gray house and cedar trees, and I won't let those things break apart. You gave me a planting ground, and because it's so dank and warm and solid, I have to challenge it with the hardiest and most fragile plants I can find. I love you, but I'm growing out of what you gave me. I'm saving it inside me and growing outwards. Thank you, thank you. Let me fight my monsters. I love you. You made me. You made me. Something in me is very mindful of the behavior of water. It might be that I grew up where a creek emptied into Eld Inlet, and I spent my days chasing snakes and floating toy boats in rivulets until the tide brought salt water in to cover my playground. It might be the conversations I had with bluegills beneath the swimming dock at my grandparents' lake cabin in Minnesota. It might be the understanding that we all come from creatures that crawled out of the ocean. We are made of water, and in some sense, our thirst and the water in our bodies is the factor that makes us like plants, like animals, like each other. At any rate, I dream of rivers. I take hours in the bathtub. I shout, "Hi, Mama," when I arrive at the ocean. I get parched and neurotic when there are too many consecutive sunny days, and I sometimes inexplicably weep while washing the dishes. Water is my symbol of transformation and cleansing and emotion, so it makes sense that an image of water was the catalyst that set me to work translating my values about my role as an artist into action. I was in Top Foods in early April when I was beginning my contract on the artist in the community. I was walking through the meat section, and all I could think about was this article I'd read about the infrastructure in Moscow. The city is heated by boiling water flowing through underground pipes. Because of the economic depression in Russia, the pipes can't be repaired. So the pipes burst and sections of soil become saturated with boiling water. People, little children, walking along the sidewalk in Moscow fall through into sinkholes and die in boiling water. I was crying in Top Foods, surrounded by every variety of dead cow you could ever want, carrying around this image of boiling to death. And the whole opulent array of Top Foods seemed like a big pink bow on the head of everything that is unjust and frivolous and neglectful about those of us with power and money. And it made me sick to my stomach to think about how self-satisfied I was that morning at having written a nice little poem about raindrops on cedar trees and having a whole quarter to talk to artists about their lives. She is older sister, Capricorn girl, had a blonde-haired baby doll named Star, gave me back massages, painted my face with mood lipstick and blush, curled my hair without burning my forehead with the curling iron, played light as a feather, stiff as a board. She is brown-haired, chocolate-eyed, tried smoking only one time and threw up on the rhododendrons, doesn't like seafood, eats Kraft macaroni and cheese, cried during Bambi, had terrible braces, fell in love only once, led me through haunted houses in the tattered red barn, sang alto in the school choir, loves her cats like children, doesn't need a sickness. Got ripped off by the tooth fairy. She is scared of garden snakes because our older brother chased her with them. Proudly stated once that her name means princess and mine means female sheep. Went to Bible camp, sold Girl Scout cookies. She is the one who introduced me to Victoria's Secret. Did my hair before ballet recitals, held the bobby pins in her mouth, danced in the background in school plays. President of her class 3 years in a row, never thought about being a cheerleader. Listened to her geometry teacher call her stupid brunette, remembers the characters on Days of Our Lives. She is feet on the ground, held there by cleats, brave, stuck moral, held there by heaviness, by air, telling me stories, holding my hand, wondering why I don't call. She is the one who still calls our mother, the one who knows how to knit, the one who could handle economics, the one who listens to confessions, the one who divided ice cream evenly. She is older sister, Capricorn girl, had a blonde doll named Star. He sleeps in my bed every night and plucks at my hair. In the mornings, I watch him sleep and grow jealous of his eyelids. They are wide as tulip petals, iridescent, made of insects' wings. I want to slip inside his eyelids and spy on him. I still haven't seen an emotion in his blue doll's eyes. He sleeps with his back to me. He curls away on my bed to his own private sleep that doesn't involve me. I climb over his back in the morning and take an inventory of his sleep features. I count his eyelashes. He sleeps with his lips blanched upward in amusement. He sleeps always at the brink of a laugh. Time limits change the whole landscape. I have borrowed Colin for a moment. A twitch of his jawbone becomes a catastrophe. After a week of sleeping side by side, I take off his shoes one night and make love to him. He dresses in my clothes for Halloween. He buys a blonde wig for $10 off a trick-or-treater who knocks on my door. He brings me a gray fedora with a red feather and a gray trench coat in case I want to be his date. He cackles while he shaves his armpits. I straddle his lap and paint him with eyeliner. He kisses me one halted kiss. Colin's kisses never change. Sneaky kisses, kisses that make me flail out, clutch his face. His kisses disappear before they're finished, the kiss of eternal withdrawal. We drive out to a party. We talk strangers out of their bottles of wine. I glance at Colin, engrossed in conversations with two women on the couch. I wander within earshot. He's squeezing his sock breasts and telling them they only wish they had what he has. We leave. We laugh as we shiver in the car. I tell him I love him. He looks at me. Oh, Rachel, I love you so much. So much, Colin, so much, so much, so much, so much, so much, so much.
Aren't they doing a beautiful job? So welcome back. Our final readers in this segment are, again, Nadia Barhoum, Sandra Lupian, Patricia Hemphill, Nadine Hamashe, Nora Barrows-Friedman, and Kian Daoud. And then following Kian's reading, Cindy and Craig Corrie will respond to your questions and then sign your books. Thank you.
Thanks. Dear Mom, Dad, and Sarah, I'm sitting on the deck of the swinging armadillo bar and hammock lounge with a warm breeze pouring in off the ocean. After our first week here, the beauty of sweltering sun on gentle Caribbean surf turned into the beauty of lightning illuminating huge blue clouds in the nights and frequent squalls bringing in violent bursts of rain. I can see Venus hanging in the southeastern sky, and my friend Goody pointed out the Big Dipper to me last night, which is almost indistinguishable here because of all the extra stars. When it's clear, I watch the meteors and dim satellites inch their way between the stars. A few nights ago, we went to a new national park a little to the north to look for birds and crocodiles, a mangrove swamp where a river empties into the Caribbean. We paddled in canoes with two Garifuna guides through this maze of dark channels and tangled mangroves forming slow-growing islands. Much to my disappointment, we didn't encounter any crocodiles, but trails of phosphorescence skidded out from our paddles, miniature reflections of shooting stars overhead, and flocks of egrets and pelicans and white herons rose out of the trees as we slid by. On the way home, there were fireflies. Being here builds up the population of flora and fauna and creature friends I store up in my brain to fuel poetry. I have particular things in my brain that are my angles: fireflies, meteors, pterodactyls, white herons, phosphorescence, manta rays. I'm madly in love with those things. I forgot cedar trees. Of course cedar trees, always cedar trees. I can't really explain it. Maybe everyone has some sort of symbolic cartography of their soul, complete with dirt roads and plant life and marine animals. Or maybe this letter will just make it that much clearer that something went awry genetically and produced an inexplicably loony third child. I think Cedar Lake, even the loons on the lake, and the amount of geographic soul area it has in the people in our family,
shows that I'm not the only sorry, sentimental fool who invests in places and animals with almost religious significance. And if it is a genetic malady, it's been present for generations. Came back from the K today and wound up in a hotel room in Dangriga, watching cable television and waiting for my stomachache to go away. Happened to flip on C-SPAN. I gather the US has dropped cruise missiles on Afghanistan and Sudan. I gather Clinton has admitted to having sex with that intern. People are calling in from all over the US to comment, and half of the people don't even seem to know that missiles were dropped. They're fixated on Clinton's tawdry sex life. One man actually quotes Wag the Dog to explain what's going on. Like that's where we're going to get the real inside information. A young boy voice calls up and is obviously reading a little prepared speech about Kenneth Starr being evil for embarrassing the president and keeping him from protecting the US from the fascists. Everybody is conjecturing about the timing of the attack and calling for the president to resign. And nobody says a word about how sad it is that people in this world have missiles dropping on them. After you lean across me to flick out the lamp, when your belly fits against the small of my back and your arm returns to curl around my shoulder, when you whisper hot good night against the hair on my neck, simultaneously your belly button tells my spine that the electric bill will be paid. The primroses will not die of thirst. The moon will not explode in the stress of clouds, and there will be coffee and bagels to eat in the morning. I was encouraged to believe in Santa Claus, in the Tooth Fairy, and in the Easter Bunny, but not in God. I don't know how much we talked about God when I was small. I remember I knew about Jesus. I think we made some pretense about being Christian. We went to church on holidays. I think my mom explained that we were Christian, but we didn't have to believe in anything about Jesus or anything we heard in church. Maybe my mom never told me we were Christian. I vaguely remember being asked by classmates. I think I told people we were Christian. I got confused when they would ask what church I went to. I thought we were Christian because we were white people who aren't Jewish. Those were the only options I was aware of. I just don't remember understanding much about religion at a young age. What I have: a house cat. Small hands, crooked toes, knees, elbows, thighs, a throat, and a belly. Dirt under my nails. 6 lost journals underneath seats and trains across the country. A Buick. Questionable. 8 black ballpoint pens. Sharp teeth, beady eyes, and hope. What I want: a garden with pumpkins and bare earth to turn over and turn over. Hardwood floors for sock ballets, air, and raspberries. Sometimes in the morning, danger and stolen kisses from a sneaky mystery lover man. September 17th, 2002. The experiment of living with Colin comes to an end with mixed results. I stop wanting to kiss him on the mouth. We still want to talk ceaselessly to each other. I stare at him. He tells me we should sell short on crude oil. He tells me we could have made money this year if we just filled my art nook with some barrels. Tonight, I went to hear the ISM returnees from Freedom Summer. I can't imagine Palestine. They say we are invited there. I can't believe this can be true. Even me? I feel a strong need for more education. September 19th, 2002. I'm pretty much gone from my home with Colin now. Today I went out into the world a little. It makes me feel a little better. Went to the library and lost Sarah's coffee mug. My honeymoon with Sarah and Kelly is over, and now we enter the period when I break and lose things. Fall 2002. Colin, I know exactly how this works because I have done it before. Now I invent pictures of you because you have perpetually just left. In a few months, I will look at these made-up pictures with a sick feeling in my stomach and wonder what sort of meticulous invention this is, like Orientalism. In a month or two, I will realize that you never existed. Who will I ask about diminishing marginal returns? The tomatoes of our love finally turned red. Your mom ate them. I dream about tomato plants. The jail phone says, Thank you for using US West. After I agree to letting my phone be tapped, as if I had a choice. I'm so sick of this.
Perry Creek bleeds out into an estuary as it empties into the inlet. In the beginning of winter, the smell of the carcasses rises all the way up into the hills. In the summer, the fry dart around in the pools beneath logs. Waterflies live in strange earthenware cocoons beneath the water, clinging to rocks. Sometimes morays piggyback in salmon reds. That way they don't have to dig to spawn. They aren't something you want to run into wading up a creek, little wiggling eel creatures with disproportionate mouths. In the summer, the rushes grow so tall you can hide in them and be completely invisible. This is where I came from, tunnels through rushes. I could spend all the light hours of all the days in tunnels through rushes in the middle of the estuary at the mouth of Perry Creek. This is where I came from, and this is where I would have liked to stay. Sunburned and hidden and close to water, making up whole pretend histories about shipwrecks and Swiss Family Robinson. At some point, signs went up in the middle of the estuary, 2 red metal signs. Once I peeked out of the reeds and saw a kid I went to middle school with walking up one of the channels on the rocks. I slithered away through the reeds like a snake. These are the ways that places cease to be utterly intimate, childishly private. I took care not to read those signs. To this day, I don't know whether they were warnings about the water quality or about the pipes buried beneath the stream or about private property. The signs were uncomfortable company. I disliked them. They did not belong. It's difficult to relinquish our sureness of the places we live. It's difficult to look at warning signs, to seek out history, to confront the places that aren't idyllic. There's a lot in Olympia that wants to be idyllic in one way or another. There have been so many times over the last several years when I've wanted to be anywhere except Olympia. I think I'll be gone within the next year. It's hard to explain it, to explain me in it, to explain how many different ways there are to see it. The salmon talked me into a lifestyle change. The salmon beneath downtown Olympia are church. Years ago, a group of us doing salmon restoration work rode a bus down to the East Bay Marina and observed the hole in the bulkhead. Salmon swim into that hole. Salmon have to make it all the way up Plum Street in that hole. The hole is Moxley Creek. Now, once you know there are salmon down there, it's hard to forget. You imagine their moony eyes while you walk home from the bar in your slutty boots. You're aware of them down there when you ride around in somebody's car, fanning their gills. It's hard to be extraordinarily vacuous when you always have the salmon in the back of your mind. In that pipe down there, on their way to daylight at Watershed Park. Salmon are the history that isn't trivia, the history that is now. They are what was here before. I can picture the estuary at the mouth of Perry Creek in my head as it looks at this moment from the Perry Creek Bridge. The sun is starting to go down on the right side of the creek, and the rushes are turning golden green. Every blade moves. Rocks the size of my fist line the edges of the channels. Shade creeps in from upstream between the alder. The tide creeps in from the opposite direction and prepares to make all the detail disappear beneath a layer of brackish water and floating weeds. From the bridge, you can hear the chuckling of the water and the noise of the grass. At times, I have been so angry at this place. I've been ashamed of this place, suffocated in it. I look at this place now with no overwhelming desire to escape, no dissociation into factoids and trivia, no agoraphobia. Certainly no bored invention of mythologies to pass the time. I look at this place now, and I just want to do right by it. The salmon beneath downtown, and the people who came to drop-in group, and the creeks and the inlets, and the people who were here first, and my elementary school teachers, and my mom. Hey, Mom, I'll call you tonight, but could you email to me with anyone you know who it would be good to contact if I get in trouble, though I'm not planning on it? Friends or family who would call their congresspeople, etc. Also, friends who might be interested in getting info or at least knowing that I'm going. The emergency contact people should probably be sympathetic to the cause, otherwise it could cause a lot of problems for me. Also, the media has enough contact with people who are not supportive of Palestinian self-determination. I don't need to put them in touch with more. But for the other list, people who might be interested in hearing that I'm going, that could be pretty much anyone who wouldn't mind getting a letter or an email. I'm going to give the Olympian your number. Please think about your language when you talk to them. For instance, if you talk about the cycle of violence or an eye for an eye or no side is right, you could be perpetuating the idea that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a balanced conflict instead of the national liberation struggle of a largely unarmed people against the fourth most powerful military in the world. These are the kinds of things it's important to think about before talking to reporters. Also, the word peace, the word nonviolent. I think it's important to spend a lot of time on what peace means, especially in the context of Oslo. Peace meant a tiny fraction of what was once Palestinian land, a network of Jewish-only roads crisscrossing that land, and no guarantee that a Palestinian state would ever exist. Peace meant the continuation of an economic stranglehold on Palestinians and Israel's veto power over any laws passed by the Palestinian Authority. Peace for the Palestinians has also frequently meant being attacked, as Israel has a history of violating ceasefires. I don't know if you saw Steve Niva's article on Counterpunch, but Sharon has, I think, pretty much admitted that suicide bombings are a way of getting more land under the guise of security. Peace for Sharon means not having an excuse for land grabs. I think it was smart that you're wary of using the word terrorism. It's important to realize that state policies that lead to deaths by malnutrition, destruction of housing, accidental shootings, assassinations, economic strangulation, and imprisonment without trial, administrative detention, are all acts of state terrorism, if we define terrorism as acts of violence directed at civilians for political purposes. In terms of the suffering of innocent people, it's a little ugly to try to quantify that suffering with numbers, but it is true that many more Palestinian children have been killed since the outbreak of the First Intifada. The London Independent apparently doesn't even allow journalists to use the word terrorism because it's obfuscatory and gets in the way of reporting. The scariest thing for non-Jewish Americans in talking about Palestinian self-determination is the fear of being or sounding anti-Semitic. Reading Chomsky's book and talking to my non-Zionist Jewish friends has helped me think about this. Mostly, I think we just all have a right to be critical of government policies, any government policies, particularly government policies which we are funding. It is important to recognize that the people of Israel are suffering and that Jewish people have a long history of oppression, which I think we, as US citizens and non-Jews, still have some responsibility for, at least for understanding the role of anti-Semitism, US foreign policy, and the slaughter of Jewish people in Europe, which the US did not intervene to stop immediately, and some of which we might have prevented had we allowed Jewish refugees to come here sooner and in greater numbers. I think white people sometimes suffer in the United States from a system that still privileges us over people of color. Men suffer from the system that privileges them over women, and Jewish Israelis suffer much more than white people and men in the US from a system in Israel that privileges them over Palestinian Israelis and Palestinians in the occupied territories. Nevertheless, the system remains a racist one. I also think it's extraordinarily important to draw a firm distinction between the policies of Israel as a state and Jewish people. That's kind of a no-brainer, but there is very strong pressure to conflate the two. Thus, the pro-Israel lobby becomes the Jewish lobby, and criticism of Israel becomes anti-Semitic. I try to ask myself, whose interests does it serve to identify Israeli people with all Jewish people? All I can think of is that it serves people who want to stifle all critique of Israeli policy, people who want to execute various foreign policy goals under the guise of doing something humanitarian for Jewish people, i.e. US, and neo-Nazis who want to use Israel's policy as a way to justify their hate. Anyway, I just want to encourage you to think about these things when you talk to the press. This kind of stuff I just think about all the time, and my ideas evolve. I'm really new to talking about Israel-Palestine, so I don't always know the political implications of my words. Rachel.
Thank you. Very little problem at the airport. My tight jeans and cropped bunny hair sweater seem to have made all the difference. And of course, the use of my Israeli friend's address. The only question was, where did you meet her? The woman behind the glass appeared not to notice my shaking hands. Took a shiruen to Jerusalem. Noticed that the Holy Land is full of rocks, and it seems like driving, you could fall off these hills. Just before we leave the airport, I read in the Let's Go Israel book Will got from Barnes & Noble that more Israelis have been killed in car accidents than in all of Israel's wars combined. I'm still trying to decide what to do with this tidbit of information a day later. Thanks for looking out for me, Anne. I would like to be doing a better job of communicating back to Oli, but right now I have only extremely limited access to slow internet and a bad keyboard. The 3 original delegates of the Rafah Olympia Sister City Association have all arrived in Rafah, a border town, mostly built of refugee camps from 1948 in the southernmost Gaza Strip. Olympia's newest sister city has already received some ambassadorship from the United States, and Washington State in particular. Someone showed me a bomb casing dropped from a helicopter when I first arrived here and said, "Made in America." The United States, perhaps one of the most racist countries in the world, loves to make believe that all sorts of other people are full of blind hatred and racism, at least when it's politically expedient. But people here are more discerning. Regularly, they tell me that governments are different from people, or that I come from a beautiful country. And when I give them a disbelieving look, well, I saw the nature on TV. I don't have time to write, but we need more people. This is a jail that the jail keepers decided was too big, so now they are squeezing it smaller. The people here live within smell of the ocean, but they can't go see it anymore. What is there beautiful? We could go to the ocean, one thing beautiful. Now I cannot see the ocean. What is for the children that is beautiful? An 8-year-old named Ali died the day before I came. He just wanted to look at the tank, see the tank, and they explode his head. The surreal thing is that we are safe. White-skinned people stand up in front of the tanks and they open their weird tank lids and wave at us. Children play behind us and we yell, "La la," when they try to wander out into the rubble to play with us, because somehow, even though you were born in a cage and you have never lived without shooting all night, you are still able to play. I couldn't even believe that a place like this existed, but even more, can you believe there are children here? Forget the fear. They tell me that at night. Forget the fear. I am ashamed that I am scared for my own body and dying anonymously inside a house in one of the most populous places on earth, where children die as martyrs of the occupation, which we pay for quietly without ever knowing their names. We need more people. I love all of you. Rachel. Mama, I'm so glad about the work you're doing in Charlotte. I think you are a really strong person, and in a lot of ways, I think it takes a lot more courage to do this kind of work in a new community, in a conservative community, than Olympia or here in Rafah, where it earns marriage proposals, which are also difficult. The incursions you wrote about have been large and bloody, but all near Gaza City or Jabalia refugee camp. One of the Palestinians in our group witnessed the assassination of at least one person, I think Hamas member, in the car in front of her on the road on the way to Gaza. She couldn't tell how many were killed or injured because the IDF took the bodies. First, plainclothes IDF commandos shot into the car, and then 2 tanks cut off the road on either side. Several months ago, this woman was riding in the car on one of her wedding days. There are sort of 2 in Muslim marriages, when her father was assassinated. So of course, it is really sad to think about her witnessing something like this again. but she is pretty tough, and kept saying she just wished she had a camera. Now the Israeli army has actually dug up the road to Gaza, and both of the major checkpoints are closed. This means that Palestinians who want to go register for their next quarter at university can't. People can't get to their jobs, and those who are trapped on the other side can't get home. And internationals who have a meeting tomorrow on the West Bank won't make it. We could probably make it through if we made some serious use of our international white person privilege, but that would also mean some risk of arrest and deportation, even though none of us are doing anything illegal. The Gaza Strip is divided in thirds now. There's some talk about the reoccupation of Gaza, but I seriously doubt this will happen because I think it would be a geopolitically stupid move for Israel right now. I think the more likely thing is an increase in smaller, below the international outcry radar incursions and possibly the off-tinted population transfer. I'm staying put in Rafah for now. No plans to head north. I still feel like I'm relatively safe and think that my most likely risk in case of a larger scale incursion is arrest. Did you see my report yet about the demo? That goes a little bit into some of the more hidden outcomes for Palestinians of war in Iraq. Also part of why I don't think they'll reoccupy Gaza. That would generate a much larger outcry than Sharon's assassination during peace negotiations / suicide attack within the Green Line / land grab strategy, which is working very well now to create settlements all over the occupied territories, slowly but surely eliminating any meaningful possibility for Palestinian self-determination. Reoccupation now would also mean Israel taking on some responsibility for the livelihood of Gazans at the very time when UNRWA is saying that they can no longer feed people. A big stupid step for a country that is already faltering economically, and of course a massive portion of the Israeli society is sick of this and would be outraged if Sharon were to invade completely. So that's what I think. Who knows whether it'll prove true. Time to go. Meeting with the youth parliament. Know that I have a lot of very nice Palestinians looking after me. I have a small flu bug and got some very nice lemony drinks to cure me. Also, the woman who keeps the key for the well where we still sleep keeps asking me about you. She doesn't speak any English, but I managed to convey to her in broken Arabic that you saw my picture in the paper. But she asks about my mom pretty frequently, wants to make sure I'm calling you. Love to you and Dad and Sarah and Chris and everybody. Rachel.
Mama, love you, really miss you. I have bad nightmares about tanks and bulldozers outside our house and you and me inside. Sometimes the adrenaline acts as an anesthetic for weeks. And then in the evening or at night, it just hits me again, a little bit of the reality of the situation. I'm really scared for the people here. Yesterday, I watched a father lead his 2 tiny children, holding his hands out into the sight of tanks and a sniper tower and bulldozers and jeeps because he thought his house was going to be exploded. Jenny and I stayed in the house with several women and 2 small babies. It was our mistaken translation that caused him to think it was his house that was being exploded, although it abuts the settler road immediately next to the Gush Katif settlement. So I think it's only a matter of time. In fact, the Israeli army was in the process of detonating an explosive in the ground nearby, one that appears to have been planted by Palestinian resistance. This is in the area where Sunday about 150 men were rounded up and contained outside the settlement with gunfire over their heads and around them, while tanks and bulldozers destroyed 25 greenhouses, the livelihoods of 300 people. The explosive was right in front of the greenhouses, right in the point of entry for tanks that might come back again. I was terrified to think that this man felt it was less of a risk to walk out in view of the tanks with his kids than to stay in his house. I was really scared that they were all going to be shot, and I tried to stand between them and the tank. This happens every day, but this father, walking out with his 2 little kids, just looking very sad, happened to get my attention more at this particular moment, probably because I felt like it was our translation problems that made him leave. I thought a lot about what you said on the phone about Palestinian violence not helping the situation. 60,000 workers from Rafah worked in Israel 2 years ago. Now only 600 can go to Israel for jobs. Of these 600, many have moved because the 3 checkpoints between here and Ashkelon, the closest city in Israel, make what used to be a 45-minute drive now a 12-hour or impassable journey. The count of homes destroyed since the beginning of this intifada is up around 600, by and large, people with no connection to the resistance, but who happen to live along the border. Most of these are refugee homes, people who landed here in 1948 when their homes in Israel, historic Palestine, became unlivable. Rafah was 3 large families and about 600 total people in 1948. Many of these families have already been relocated since their arrival in Rafah, most notably in Canada and Brazil camps, which were moved back into the Gaza Strip when Israel withdrew from the Sinai. This, in addition to the killings every several days, I think it is maybe official now that Rafah is the poorest place in the world. There used to be a middle class here recently. I imagine you reading about that in the Amira Haas book. We also get reports that in the past, Gazan flour shipments to Europe were delayed for 2 weeks at the Eretz crossing for security inspections. You can imagine the value of 2-week-old cut flowers in the European market, so that market dried up. And then the bulldozers come and take out people's vegetable farms and gardens. What is left for people? Tell me if you can think of anything. I can't. So when someone says that any act of Palestinian violence justifies Israel's actions, not only do I question that logic in light of international law, which recognizes the right of people to legitimate armed struggle in defense of their land and their families, not only do I question that logic in light of the 4th Geneva Convention, which prohibits collective punishment, prohibits the transfer of an occupying country's population into an occupied area, prohibits the expropriation of water resources and the destruction of civilian infrastructure, such as farms. Not only do I question that logic in light of the sheer ridiculousness of the notion that 50-year-old Russian guns and homemade explosives can have any impact on the activities of one of the world's largest militaries, backed by the world's only superpower. I also question that logic on the basis of common sense. If any of us had our lives and welfare completely strangled, lived with children in a shrinking place where we knew, because of previous experience, that soldiers and tanks and bulldozers could come for us at any moment, which would perhaps be a somewhat less cruel death than starvation, chronic malnutrition, and nitrite poisoning caused from increasing reliance on wells located at the distance from settlements, eastward, where the water quality is poor, with no means for economic survival, and our houses destroyed. If they came and destroyed all the greenhouses that we'd been cultivating for the last however long, and did this while some of us were beaten and held captive with 149 other people for several hours, do you think we might try to use somewhat violent means to protect the edge of the greenhouses, to protect whatever fragments remained? A bomb buried in the ground, after all, can't be detonated unless a large piece of machinery rolls over the top of it. I think about this, especially when I see orchards and greenhouses and fruit trees destroyed. Just years of care and cultivation. I think about you and how long it takes to make things grow and what a labor of love it is. I really think in a similar situation, most people would defend themselves as best they could. I think Uncle Craig would. I think probably Grandma would. I think I would. Anyway, I'm rambling. Just want to write to my mom and tell her that I'm witnessing this chronic, insidious genocide, and I'm really scared and questioning my fundamental belief in the goodness of human nature. This has to stop. I think it's a good idea for us all to drop everything and devote our lives to making this stop. I don't think it's an extremist thing to do anymore. I still really want to dance around to Pat Benatar and have boyfriends and make comics for my coworkers. But I also want this to stop. Disbelief and horror is what I feel. Disappointment. I'm disappointed that this is the base reality of our world and that we, in fact, participate in it. This is not at all what I asked for when I came into this world. This is not at all what the people here asked for when they came into this world. This is not what they are asking for now. This is not the world you and Dad wanted me to come into when you decided to have me. This is not what I meant when I was 2 and looked at Capitol Lake and said, "This is the wide world and I'm coming to it." I did not mean that I was coming into a world where I could live a comfortable life and possibly, with no effort at all, exist in complete unawareness of my participation in genocide. More big explosions somewhere in the distance outside. I probably sound a little crazy, reminiscent maybe of going to Russia years ago, although that situation was not like this one. I know you wondered if going to Russia was a bad thing because it sort of seemed to ruin me. I think the reason I went crazy was not because Russia was bad for me, but because of the initial disappointment in discovering that my government really did lie to me about the Russians, and in the massive absence of justice in the world. And again, through observing US companies' investment in natural resource extraction in newly quote-unquote democratized Russia, and the devastation of the Russian economy in the wake of the arms race, and discovering my participation in the subjugation of other people. When I come back from Palestine, I probably will have nightmares and constantly feel guilty for not being here. But I can channel that into more work. Coming here is one of the better things I've ever done. So when I sound crazy, or the Israeli army, or if the Israeli army should break their racist tendency not to injure white people, please pin the reason squarely on the fact that I am in the midst of a genocide, which I am also indirectly supporting, and for which my government is largely responsible. I love you and Dad. Sorry for the diatribe. Okay, some strange man next to me just gave me some peas, so I need to eat and thank them. Rachel.
February 28th, 2003. Thanks, Mom, for your response to my email. It really helps me to get word from you and from other people who care about me. I'm really sad to hear that Sarah's Crohn's situation is so bad. I'll send her an email. Please tell her that I love her very much. She sent me some really nice emails a few weeks ago, which I very much appreciated. I haven't heard from her since, and I imagine it is just stress and sickness. But if you talk to her, you can tell her that if she is well enough and has a little time, she can send me emails that aren't political, that don't have anything to do with where I am, and that are just about how things are with her and Kelly and the cats. She sounds like she has really made an effort to find out about Israel and Palestine. Politics of any sort is the hardest topic for Sarah and me, so I felt like this was just really a big deal and a real expression of love, if not political sympathy. It was hugely important to me. I don't want her to feel like communication with me needs to have any political element to it. I think I may have neglected to answer her last email, so don't interpret it as me thinking she's neglecting me. Just send her my love, and I will too. After I wrote to you, I spent the evening and this morning finishing the big report I sent out, and then had a long talk with my friend Stefan, who was here and then returned to Sweden. And then I went incommunicado from the affinity group for about 10 hours, which I spent with a family on the front line in Hay Salam, who fixed me dinner and have cable TV. The 2 front rooms of their house are unusable because gunshots have been fired through the walls, so the whole family, 3 kids and 2 parents, sleep in the parents' bedroom. I sleep on the floor next to the youngest daughter, Iman, and we all share blankets. I helped the son with his English homework a little, and we all watched Pet Sematary, which is a horrifying movie. They all thought it was pretty funny how much trouble I had watching it. Friday is the holiday, and when I woke up, they were watching Gummy Bears dubbed into Arabic. So I ate breakfast with them and sat there for a while and just enjoyed being in this big puddle of blankets with this family watching what for me seemed like Saturday morning cartoons. Then I walked some way to Barazil, which is where Nidal and Mansour and grandmother and Rafat and all the rest of the big family that has really wholeheartedly adopted me live. The other day, by the way, grandmother gave me a pantomimed lecture in Arabic that involved a lot of blowing and pointing to her black shawl. I got Nidal to tell her that my mother would appreciate knowing that someone here was giving me a lecture about smoking turning my lungs black. Nidal's English gets better every day. He's the one who calls me my sister after we did human shield work with water workers in his neighborhood. He started teaching grandmother how to say, "Hello, how are you?" in English. You can always hear the tanks and bulldozers passing by, but all of these people are genuinely cheerful with each other and with me. When I am with Palestinian friends, I tend to be somewhat less horrified than when I'm trying to act in a role of human rights observer or documenter or direct action resistor. They are a good example of how to be in it for the long haul. I know that the situation gets to them and may ultimately get them on all kinds of levels, but I'm nevertheless amazed at their strength in being able to defend such a large degree of their humanity, laughter, generosity, family time, against the incredible horror occurring in their lives and against the constant presence of death. I felt much better after this morning. I spent a lot of time writing about the disappointment of discovering, somewhat firsthand, the degree of evil of which we are still capable. I should at least mention that I'm also discovering a degree of strength and of the basic ability for humans to remain human in the direst of circumstances, which also I haven't seen before. I think the word is dignity. I wish you could meet these people. Maybe, hopefully, someday you will. I don't expect to see the world that I want to live in emerge during my lifetime. I expect things to get worse before they get better, as wealth and power continue to be concentrated in the hands of the few, and as the quality of the environment degrades exponentially every generation. I know this sounds incredibly angry, cynical, and negative. It's just the reality as I can see it, so I sort of try to operate from that. But given that, I look forward to a lot of things. I think I could see a Palestinian state, or a democratic Israeli-Palestinian state within my lifetime. Freedom for Palestine could be an incredible source of hope to people struggling all over the world. It could also be an incredible inspiration to Arab people in the Middle East who are struggling under undemocratic regimes which the US supports. I think a lot of the world is closely watching what goes on in Brazil right now. The election of Lula amidst economic blackmail from foreign investors is an incredible example of a people's demand for autonomy and democracy in the face of immense pressure. I look forward to continuing to see creative attempts at cooperatives, intentional communities, and sustainable agriculture all over the world. I look forward to seeing an escalating number of people willing to risk life and limb in order to resist the direction we are moving in. I look forward to increasing numbers of middle-aged, middle-class, privileged people like you and me becoming aware of the structures that support our privilege and beginning to support the work of those who aren't privileged to dismantle those structures. I look forward to more moments like February 15th, when civil society wakes up en masse and issues massive and resonant evidence of its conscience, its unwillingness to be repressed, and its compassion for the suffering of others. I look forward to more teachers emerging like Matt Grant and Barbara Weaver and Dale Newth, who teach critical thinking to kids in the United States. I look forward to the international resistance that's occurring now, fertilizing analysis on all kinds of issues with dialogue between diverse groups of people. It's important for people in the United States in relative privilege to realize that people without privilege will be doing this work no matter what, because they are working for their lives. We can work with them, and they know that we work with them, or we can leave them to do this work themselves and curse us for our complicity in killing them. I really don't get the sense that anyone here curses us. People here are actually more concerned in the immediate about our comfort and health than they are about us risking our lives on their behalf. At least that's the case for me. People try to give me a lot of tea and food in the midst of gunfire and explosive detonation. I feel like I'm giving you advice, which is kind of stupid, but I do think that it's important to recognize all the zillions of small things we can do for change. I don't mean just recycling or something and then congratulating ourselves. I mean small revolutionary things. Certainly the lengths that you go to educate yourself, your open mind, all your hard work for people over the years, all of this is exceptional and is having an impact on more people than just your daughter. I really appreciate you. I love you very much. Take care of yourself.
I am Rachel Corrie. I was killed by the Israeli military on March 16, 2003, in Rafah, Gaza, Palestine. I was 23 years old. 13 years earlier, when I was 10 years old, I wrote, "I'm here for other children. I'm here because I care. I am a flame red tulip, tinged in yellow-orange. I am the stone that people sat on yesterday. I am the orca wearing black and white. I am the snow falling down over black sky. I am a misty reflection dancing on the sparkly water. I am the sand that feels bare brown feet. I am the ashes in the garden. I am a lamplight late at night by a typewriter. I am a river running over me, turning me, carrying me. I'm an autumn leaf gliding down at sunset. I am lightning and thunder, fire and rain. I am the morning dew on a wheat field. I am a dove journeying with the sooty wind. I am colored like the wind. I sound like daydreams. I taste like the moonlight. I am everything, and everything is me."
Go ahead, stand on the front. Yeah. Please give them a big hand. Thank you. And now if Cindy and Craig would join me up here. They're going to answer respond to some of the questions that you all have written in your cards. And then after that, they'll be available to sign your books up here. You've been a magnificent audience. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, Cindy, you and I are going to share a mic, and for obvious reasons, Craig is going to, yeah, why don't you, oh, yeah, that's fine. You can just, that's fine. Good. Great. So one question, why did Russia wake Rachel up?
Rachel went to Russia when she was 15 years old. It was at the point when, just after the fall of the Soviet Union, a group of students from Sakhalin Island had come to her high school, Capital High School in Olympia. There were 5 Russian students. One lived with us for 3 months, Anyuta. Their teacher came with them, and that was a life-changing experience. We had foreign exchange students that had lived in our home before, but this was a new experience, a very special experience. And then Rachel and her classmates went back to Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk and stayed there for 6 weeks, and she lived in the home of Anyuta. And it was an awakening because I think she's much more articulate in describing it than I am. But she was staying with a family that was suffering a lot. All the people there were suffering a lot at the time. I don't know if you all remember the pictures of no food on the shelves around that time. And yet she describes how they managed to find food for her and to share with her. And so I think the real impact was that Russia had been our enemy in this country. And so this really opened her eyes, because she saw the reality of the human beings who were living there, and the families and the children that she went to school with. And it had a dramatic impact on her. And Rachel was our 3rd child. She was, always, this is a story of a person finding their path. And our first 2 kids, went through high school doing all the sort of typical high school things. And Rachel tried to do that in her freshman year and so forth. She describes that, getting the straight A's and everything. But there was always this piece of her, I think, that wanted to break out. And Russia was kind of a catalyst for that. It wasn't always an easy path, but I think she describes very well how she found her way.
I think this one follows up well. This person has a parenting question. How do you teach or instill such courage? Of all Rachel's qualities, her rare courage strikes me most.
Rachel taught us. I don't think it was the other way around. I'm a Vietnam vet. I sometimes tell this story. In Vietnam, I was with the 1st Air Cavalry in 1970, and I was a combat engineer. So you didn't have to carry a gun where I was. You could go out there and do whatever we were doing, blowing up trees and creating fire bases and stuff, without carrying a gun. So every once in a while, I maybe met 6 guys that came in and said, I'm not going to carry a gun. I'm just not going to do it. I never met anybody, however, that after the first time they were under incoming, being shot at, that the next morning they didn't go down to the supply sergeant and say, the gun's not all that heavy. I'll just take it and carry it around, and I can decide later whether I use it or not. And so that courage to go back out morning after morning or night after night and face somebody without allowing the adrenaline to carry you through it by being violent back to them. I would have said through most of my life that I'd never met anybody that had the courage to do that. But of course, through all that time, I knew Rachel. And now I know a whole lot of other people, many of whom are in this room, that have had that same courage to go back out, stay on those houses, and protect those people when somebody else has a gun and they're just armed with their own courage and conviction. So I can't really answer where she got that.
I'd like to just add one thing. Craig and I just came back from Israel and Palestine. And on our last day there, we went to the village of Belin in the West Bank. We'd been to Belin in 2005 as well. And many of you probably know that it's a village that's lost 60% of its land to the fence. It's fence that's going through there and new Israeli settlement development. For years now, that village, the village made the choice, the village council made the choice to respond nonviolently to what was happening because they thought it would be best for their children. And when we came into town, into Berlin, it's a little place, and there were kids on the road, you know, walking along. I think the boy that greeted us was on a bicycle, but he stopped because he knew we were trying to figure out where to go, and he knew the house to take us to, and we wanted to go to where the march that day out to Berlin on Friday was going to happen. And I thought about that because there was a child, a Palestinian child, who was watching the older people in the community make this decision to respond nonviolently to what was happening. But when we got out there, and there was a lot of tear gas that day, and there were rubber bullets that day, and we stayed pretty much to the back of what was going on. People wanted to make sure we were safe, and I hadn't been in a situation where there was tear gas before. But I was really struck. There's a man named Abdullah. Some of you probably know him, and he went to the front. And he was elevated somehow. I can't remember if he was standing, what he was standing on, but I just saw his figure out there, and I keep seeing his figure over and over and over again as he stood up against the fence. Israeli military with guns, with tear gas and everything, just across, very near, across the way. And he turned and he said, "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid, you can come closer." And I really stood there and wondered, you know, the same question that person asked me about how does somebody find that kind of courage in themselves, because it was a very threatening situation, and yet week after week after week, this is the tool that Abdullah uses when he goes out there. And it was very, very inspiring, and I think Rachel would want us to say that there are some very courageous people that are carrying on this work with little result. The Israeli Supreme Court last fall ruled that that fence should be moved to return a portion of the Palestinian land to this village, and yet the Supreme Court order has not yet been, you know, they haven't moved the fence. And still, that's why they keep going to do this. So there are some remarkable people doing this work.
Thank you for that, Cindy. And it made me just wonder, since I just remember that you were over there, I guess I knew at least initially in Haifa, because My Name is Rachel Corrie was being performed in Arabic. Could you tell us what that was like?
Yeah, it was wonderful. The production by Al Medan Theater, which is, I think, the only sort of theater that travels throughout Israel and Palestine. The others are very local. Did it. It opened on Sunday, March 16th, so exactly 5 years after Rachel was killed. And very, very strong actress. We, of course, couldn't understand but one or two words that she was saying, but we know the play well, and I think, you know, it's very moving to see the strength, actually, is what I'm thinking of when we've seen the play lots of times with different actresses, but the strength of her particular performance, I think, was extraordinary. I think that comes from her experience as a Palestinian. I think going there, I thought that particularly the director, I thought that they would be relating to the story of Rachel and to the play because of Rachel coming to Gaza and how she was killed, and that sense of solidarity. But what I was struck by, and maybe from what you've heard here, and again, I guess it's a proud father talking about it, but Riyadh kept coming back to the play and who Rachel was reading, you know, and what she was writing at a fairly young age when she was in high school and stuff. And so it really was a kindred spirit, not because that she'd come to Palestine, but because of the literature that Rachel was involved in, that Riyadh was interested in. And so it was kind of surprising to me that here's a guy that was really relating to her as a kindred spirit throughout the world from this literature background.
Thank you. Another question, can you tell us how young people in the U.S. are reacting to Rachel's story?
I can tell you about how some young people all over the world are responding to Rachel's story. After the play opened in London in 2005, we heard about young people that would go out and walk for a couple of hours and ponder, I think, what they had heard, and I suppose think about what's the message in the story and in the play. I want to tell you, though, about a recent thing that happened. We were in Ramallah the last night that we were in Israel and Palestine, and we did a talk at the Quaker Meeting House, a very kind of spontaneous thing that happened within 24 hours, got set up, and there was this young woman who came up to me kind of at the beginning, and I saw her standing there, and looking at her face, I could see there was so much feeling in her face, but she didn't say a word. And then we did our talk, and we came back up, and she said, when I thought about you, when I would see you, I would think about my parents, and because they just wouldn't understand. They didn't understand why I needed to be here and what I was doing. And she said, then I bought them 2 tickets to go to the play in Sweden, to the play My Name is Rachel Corrie. It's happening now. The play has been happening all around the world. And her parents went to the play, and she said, they called me up and they were crying, and they said, we understand now, we understand why you're doing this. So it was a wonderful moment for us. In the US, all kinds of reactions, but I think the ones that we hear about are sometimes from young Palestinians who come and meet with us and talk to us and just want to make that connection, connect very powerfully to Rachel's story. And I think for a lot of people, for a lot of young people, there's a lot of soul searching about what they can do. And I think that the message in the play, you didn't hear these words tonight, but if you read the book, you'll find them. Rachel said, you know, I can't be Jesus, I can't be Picasso, I can't do all these things. I can wash dishes. And so the message, I think, for all of us is that we can do something, and that together, that's a pretty big and important thing that we do.
Well, that leads into another one of the questions, Cindy. This person wrote, it all seems so hopeless that the Israeli government will continue to destroy the possibility for life and peace, and I would add, with U.S. complicity. What can we as Americans do?
I think we keep doing what we're doing, and look, of course, for new and creative ways to approach this in our country. We spent more time this trip in Israel proper. And I have to say that when you're driving down the freeways near Tel Aviv, even when you're in the Galilee, in Palestinian villages like Nazareth, you recognize how easy it is for Gaza to be invisible, even for the West Bank to be invisible. And it feels like a very, very, very big thing. But I think that one thing that we can do here, I went to a conference last fall, and the professor, it was the U.S. campaign to end the Israeli occupation's fall meeting. And there was a professor who opened the conference, a host at George Mason University. And he said, I think in terms of awareness in this country, that you're reaching a tipping point. I don't know if that's true. I think it's really hard to judge when you're in the middle of it. But I'd like to think that that's true. And he said that when that happens, then the question is, what do you do when you're winning? You know, what do you do when you're starting to reach that point? And I think that we have a choice in this country about how our tax dollars are to be used. We need to exercise that choice. We need to talk about this a lot with many people, keep doing what we're doing. And I have confidence that it may take a long time. We may still be in it for the long haul. For us, it's a short time, 5 years, but it feels too long. But I think, you know, I really believe that right will prevail in this, and that all of us, the whole world, will benefit as a result of it.
Thank you for that hope. Just one or two more questions, because I know it's getting late. Talk about what you went through while Rachel was in Palestine. Did you recognize as she was growing up what a gifted daughter you had?
I'll take the last one first. I have two gifted daughters, and yes, we realized it, I think, when they were growing up. But Rachel was always the kid in the corner. She was always drawing, as the book points out, as she points out in the book. She was either drawing or writing, kind of chronicling the family's life going on around her. And we'd find slips of that paper. You'd read something. She'd leave them. She was a messy kid. She'd leave them all over, and that's kind of a tragedy because we're probably missing far more of her writing than we ever found. But again, I'm a proud father, obnoxiously proud, I suppose. And yeah, I think we recognize that. All three of our children, I think we thought were talented in very different ways. The first question was, how did we feel when Rachel went to Gaza? And I'll let Cindy answer that after I give a stab at it. But again, coming from a background of being in the military in Vietnam, I think I related kind of what she was doing from that background. And I looked at Rachel and thought, here's a tall, skinny woman, and if she is doing something that the Israeli military would rather she didn't do, she could be arrested. And I was, again, coming from my background, I know the U.S. military did some horrible things in Vietnam, but my squad didn't do it. We were respectful, I think, of other people. You can't really have a respectful occupation, and we were an occupying army. But I think there was a respect, at least for human life and Vietnamese in some way around us. And I had heard that that's what the Israeli military was about. So when Rachel got to Rafah, and she started writing to us about the bullet holes around the windows of houses that had children in them, when she started describing that the Israeli tanks would come out and shoot at their feet. Now, I'm a terrible shot. I was trained to shoot low, because if you shoot low, it ricochets and it actually enlarges your target. So if you're a poor shot, you shoot low, and one way or another, you're liable to hit something. And so it just scared the hell out of me that she went there. And I thought for a week or two that Rachel has no idea of what she's into there, because this isn't the way a military ought to act. It's out of control. There's no discipline. It's not that an accident might happen. It's that nobody cares. And after a couple of weeks, then it dawned on me that, of course, you can't be in that situation. Just like with me in Vietnam, you get educated really quickly. It's the idea that people write and say Rachel was naive. You can't be there that long and be naive. I mean, that's naivete to think that you can be in that situation like that. So, so after about a couple of weeks, then I realized she was as seasoned as I had been after a year in Vietnam, and she knew what was going on. So, through that time, though, I was too frightened to write to her. I only wrote one email. The rest of the time we could talk. That was different than when I was in Vietnam. You had the telephone, and she would call us, and I could hear her voice, and I know at least she, I know the situation right then. And so just Cindy was out of town a week before Rachel was killed, and I did get an email off to Rachel, and she returned that email, I think Wednesday, and that's the last contact we had with her, was her writing back to me.
I'll always remember the first phone call from Gaza, because I could hear trembling in Rachel's voice when she asked if we could hear the shelling coming from outside the house that she was staying in. It was the same house, as far as I remember, as the one that she stood in front of when she was killed. But as she wrote, as she was there longer, she really, I think, drew strength from the Palestinian people that she was living with and working with. And I think I could hear her confidence grow in her ability to do what she needed to do there. And I think, you know, as the time went on, I had hoped that she might come home before the start of the Iraq War. I felt very vulnerable about that. And in the book, you'll see that I ask her, you know, do you think about coming home? And I knew that she wasn't going to, because she very specifically wanted to be there if war with Iraq happened, because there was a feeling that things would get much worse in the West Bank and Gaza. It didn't happen, I think, quite the way people envisioned, but certainly over time, as our focus and emphasis was on Iraq, things did get much worse in the occupied territories. I think we hoped, you know, we believed nobody had been killed in ISM. There had been some injuries, and I think there was, you know, this feeling if she just got through a few more weeks, then she would come home maybe. So that's kind of how we reacted at the time that she was there.
And this will be our last question. And again, after this, you can come on up here on stage, and Cindy and Craig will sign your book for you. Where does the crying heart graze? This is poetry from Naomi Shihab Nye. Rachel's poetry is also sustaining. What sustains you?
Well, a lot of things sustain us. I was standing here thinking, I have to make sure that I say, this is really the launch of the book, Let Me Stand Alone, here. And I think, what a great place to be here in Berkeley to have this happening, because there has been a depth to the support that our family has received from this community that's probably unparalleled in the whole country, except maybe for Olympia. So I thank you all, because we really are sustained by all of you and by the many groups here who through these 5 years have worked with us in different ways. All the groups that are represented out front, we're working with many right now in different ways. And I just, it's really a give and take. When we spoke in Ramallah, and we spoke in West Jerusalem this time, which we've never done really in either place before, but Jeff Helper, when he heard we were in town, asked if we would come and talk in West Jerusalem, and there was a room full of people. And I talked about it on KPFA yesterday, about how I think we trade energy. That sometimes when things feel kind of hopeless, and there was a person in West Jerusalem who said he was just so fed up with his government, an Israeli who was so fed up he just couldn't do anything anymore. But he came to hear what we had to say. And in the same way that I think maybe knowing that there are people here who've had the experience that we've had that can do this work, they draw something from us, but we draw something from them being there, doing their work in West Jerusalem and in Ramallah and here in Berkeley. So it's very much the people. Our family, I have some family here in the audience. I believe my sister and my brother-in-law came from Ashland. My niece, Gina, was on the stage and read tonight. All of our family have been deeply impacted and in unbelievable ways have lent support to all the work that we've done. So I'm very much sustained. We're very much sustained by them as well. And I hope, like all of you, when you spend some more time with Rachel through her writing, through her humor, and through her insights, which we somebody asked about, did we know about the gift that she had as a writer and thinker, and actually from a little time that she was very small, she said these very surprising things to us, and so she just made our life very rich, and she still makes our lives very, very rich with these wonderful words.
Let's give a big hand to Cindy and Craig Corrie. Thank you.
You've been watching a tribute to Rachel Corrie, author of Let Me Stand Alone. For more on the late Rachel Corrie, visit the Rachel Corrie Foundation website at rachelcorriefoundation.org.